Hello and welcome. This is Obsidian Anubis, and this is my second ninth age battle report. This is at rules set 0.99. Again, this is the Empire of Sonnstahl versus Saurian Ancients at 2,500 points. So let's go meet the two armies. So I brought to the table 11 Knightly Order with full command and a Banner of the Stallion. In the front left of that group, I brought a Cleric with a Great Weapon and the Armor of Destiny, and he has a Barded Warhorse. And in the right of that, I have my General, who has the Seasoned General upgrade, Hammer of the Witch, Armor of Volund, and Talisman of Greater Shielding. He also has a horse and barding. To the right of that, I have my artillery. I have my cannon and my mortar, which is being proxied by my volley gun. And in front of those, I have a 20 crossbowmen group with a banner and a level 3 Lore of Light with the Dispel Skull. You can see him in the front right there of the crossbowmen. In the center of the board, I had 20 heavy infantry with a banner. Behind them, I had my arcane alto, with the upgrade of Foreseeing, and a large group of 49 halberdiers with veterans, full command, and a war banner. So in my previous battle report, I had this switched where I had a large block of hand weapon and shields group and a smaller 20-man group of halberdiers. So I decided to switch it in this group because in the first battle report, I felt like the hand weapon and shield troops just weren't doing what they should. I mean, with being veterans, they really didn't even need the hand weapon and shield because they had a 4-up weapon skill, so it was basically the same. So I decided to switch those two around and have the large group being the halberdiers and being the veterans, and have the small group being the hand weapon and shields. In the front left of that halberdier group, you can see my captain. He is also a BSB. He has the winter cloak and a folk plate. And then in this picture, you can see the other half of my halberdier group block. And in the front right, I have my cleric. He has the screaming hammers, armor of Frederick the Great. And then to the left of him, I have an unpainted model, which I'm using as my Inquisitor. So he has brace of pistols, and I gave him the wizard hood. So the reason why I did this is in my previous game, I had a level 3 Lore of Light and a level 2 Lore of Death. And I felt with two wizards, I never rolled enough winds of magic. I could never really get off more than one spell a turn anyways. And so I felt magic was really not working the way it should. So I decided I'd kind of go with a half wizard. So I went with this Inquisitor and gave him the Wizarding Hood. So he's still level 2. And for this battle, I rolled randomly, and it was nature. That was his lore. But because he has brace pistol, so he still has 3 attacks. He's full plate, so he's 4 armor save. So he's kind of a half wizard, half fighter. So I figured that might give me a bit more dynamic with this character than instead just this level 2 wizard. So I figured I'd give that a try. And then to the right of that, I have my 10 archers over here on my left flank. And on the very far left flank, I have my 5 readers with brace pistols and musician. So my opponent has 15 skink braves in front of a 25 Saurian warrior block with full command, and they have been given the Jaguar upgrade, so that means they get a +1 movement. To the right of that, my opponent has a level 2 wizard with a Dispel Scroll. Next to that is a Bastildon with the Sun engine. In front of that is a Spearback, and then to the right of that in the forest is another group of 25 Saurian warriors, full command, with the Serpent Blessing. This allows them to attack in 3 rings instead of just 2. And with that group is also a Saurian veteran with the Sword of Strife. So it's a nasty unit there. To the right of that is my opponent's general. It's a Saurian warlord on a Carnosaur. Honestly, I don't remember what equipment this character had. I think it had a 1-up armor save and maybe a 5-up force save, but it didn't really come in contact, or it didn't really matter for this battle so much. So I don't know what my opponent had there. To the right of that is a second Spearback along with a second Bastildon. This one also with the Sun engine upgrade. Next to that is a group of 24 skinks with full command and 2 caiman in front of a third 25 Saurian warrior full command block. And in that block is my opponent's level 3 skink priest with the alchemy lore. My opponent also had a third Spearback, and on the very right of this picture you can see a couple of skinks. Those are skink hunters. I believe my opponent had 10 of those. My opponent also had chameleons, but they popped up later and I will show you a picture later on that has the chameleons in it. For magic, my level 3 rolled up the Shield of Protection, the Net of Light, and Divine Banishment, and my level 2 rolled up Healing Waters and the Oaken Throne. So for Vanguard, I moved up my readers. You can see my opponent placed the chameleons there. That little glass bead is a secondary objective we had. There's 2 of them. This is on the left flank. There's also one on the right flank, which I will show in a minute. So going to the Empire of Sonnstahl turn 1, I moved up my readers around so they kind of were more on the flank of the chameleons, but other than that, the rest of my army stayed put. I didn't really move. I outranged my opponent, so I was going to just let them come to me. In the bottom of this picture, you can see the second glass bead, which is the secondary objective. For magic, I rolled up 6 Winds of Magic. I went ahead and threw some at the Oaken Throne, hoping to have my opponent throw some dice at dispelling this, but they didn't. So I got it off. Next, I threw up the Net of Light on the Skink Cayman cohort, but my opponent unfortunately dispelled that one. Going to shooting, my cannon shot at the enemy general on the Carnosaur and it missed. My mortar shot at these Skink Hunters over here on the right flank and shot about half of them off, so that was pretty good. My crossbowman shot at the Skink Cayman mixed cohort, and I believe I killed 1 or 2 skinks, but nothing of significance. They were still at pretty long range. Going to Saurian Ancient turn 1, my opponent just moved up in general. I don't have a picture, but all across the board, my opponent just kind of moved up, kind of very aggressively. On my left flank, my opponent's right flank, where my readers are, the chameleons turned, and this group of skink braves kind of came up to surround my readers. For magic, my opponent rolled 11 power dice, so good magic phase. So they started with throwing the Beast Within on the skink braves over by my readers. I let this off because I knew I wasn't going to get in close combat with them if I could help it, so I let that through. Next, my opponent threw the Silver Spike off on my knights. This is kind of like a bolt throw, but it hurts people with better armor worse. So of course I threw them at my knights who have a 2-up armor save, and I attempted to dispel this, but I failed. My opponent then attempted to cast a third spell, a second alchemy spell, but that one I dispelled. For shooting, between the chameleons and the skink braves, I only lost 1 reader, so it wasn't too bad there. And the rest of my opponent's shooting was just out of range, so no other shooting really to speak of. So that brings us to turn 2, Empire of Sonnstahl. So for movement, again, I was playing the defensive game. I just kind of moved my readers around, but the rest of my army stayed pretty solid. I didn't want to move up yet. I knew my opponent would be in range next turn, so I just was waiting for them to come to me. So I jumped straight to magic. I didn't have a powerful magic phase this turn, so I just threw I think all my dice at Shield of Protection, which I got off in the bubble. So this allowed me to get it off on my cannon, my crossbowmen, and my small group of 20 hand weapon shield troops. For shooting, I think I opened up on the chameleons with my readers, and I killed off all but 3. So I killed off 7 of them, I believe. So that was fantastic, but unfortunately my opponent passed the panic test, so they remained on the board. My cannon shot off at the Carnosaur and managed to hit and wound and do 2 wounds, so that's a good start. And then my mortar targeted the skink braves over here, skink hunters over on the right flank again, and managed to kill off 3 of them. So slowly whittling them down. I was just afraid of them coming in, sneaking in behind my knights and getting to my artillery, so I was trying to weaken them down now. Yeah, and this is just again showing that I think this is me showing that my crossbowman was shooting at the skink Cayman cohort, and I killed off a couple of the skinks there in the right. So going to my opponent's Saurian Ancient turn 2. Again, I don't have a picture of movement, but otherwise they moved up pretty aggressively. All the spearbacks are now in range, and again my opponent kind of covered my readers with skinks. So going straight to magic, my opponent rolled 9 power dice. So first they threw up enchanted blades, which gives a +1 to hit on the skink braves over by my readers. So I let that through, but I managed to stop off the spear-like alchemy spell. But my opponent did miscast that previous spell, so that helped. So my opponent got 1 wound on and lost some dispel dice, which enabled me to dispel all my opponent's remaining spells. Going to shooting, the chameleons started targeting my hunters over here on my left flank and killed off 3 of them. Luckily, I passed my panic, and they remained on the board. The skink braves with the +1 to hit wiped out my readers. So this is something I've been encountering so far every time I've played with my readers, is they've always died before the end of turn 2. So if you guys have suggestions of how I could keep them alive, I've considered maybe holding them back instead of vanguarding, maybe just holding them back and protecting my lines, and then maybe sending them out more as a later game. instead of just setting them at the beginning. So if you guys have any suggestions, I'd love to hear those. One of my opponent's spearback shot at my knights and managed to kill off one. Another spearback shot off at my hand weapon and shields. Luckily, because I had the shield of protection up, I only lost one, so that was good. And that was the end of my opponent's turn 2. So going to Empire of Sonnstahl turn 3. Again, I don't have a picture of movement. I didn't move most of my troops other than my knights. My knights declared a charge on the Skink came in cohort, which my opponent held and I made it in. So after that I went straight to magic. I would up 4, and so I threw all 4 dice at Divine Banishment, which I did get off without miscasting. My opponent couldn't stop it. And I targeted one of the spearbacks, but I only managed to do 1 wound with the spell. So that was a little frustrating, but I finally got the spell off and it didn't really do anything. I'm going to shooting. My mortar targeted the Saurian warriors and I managed to kill 1. I think I drifted off and then just barely clipped a couple and I managed to injure 1 of them. The rest of my shooting was pretty insubstantial. My cannon shot at the Saurian warlord and missed. My crossbowman, I think, shot at one of the spearbacks and did 1 wound or no wounds. It was pretty sad shooting phase. So that goes to a close combat phase. My knights managed to kill off 7 of the skinks from combat. My opponent managed to kill off 3 of my knights in return. So I did beat my opponent in combat, but my opponent, being cold-blooded, rolled 3 dice and easily passed the panic test. So we'll stick there for another round. Here's a picture kind of showing the right side of the board. You can see my opponent is moving up with the spearback and the rest of the troops, and the knights and the skink came in kind of locked in combat there. So going to Saurian Ancient turn 3. So on kind of in the center of the board, you can see my opponent moving up. I kind of have shifted my halberdiers a little bit to the left because there's that second group of 25 Jaguar blessed Saurian warriors coming through the forest towards my lines. I'm worried about his general. His general is getting pretty close. I think actually he declared a charge on my hand weapon and shields and just rolled terribly and didn't make it in. But I'm afraid that next turn that'll probably make it into contact with my troops, and my troops I don't think would be good enough to hold that character at bay. Going to my opponent's magic, they rolled 10, so that was pretty substantial. Luckily this turn though, they didn't get much off. I did use my Dispel Scroll this turn, and I don't think my opponent got off any spells, so that was helpful. Going straight to shooting, my opponent's Skink Hunters over here on the right flank snuck around and started shooting at my cannon and did 1 wound. So even though I had shot it twice with 2 mortar shots, it still had 6 skinks left, which were killing them. That got to my artillery, unfortunately. The shooting on the left flank, there wasn't much shooting. I think my opponent shot at my hunters, but because the skirmishers and they were in the woods, my opponent needed like 6s to hit and managed and didn't get any. So no other shooting to speak of. In close combat, I killed off a bucket load of skinks, but you can see that I also lost the rest of my knights. This is something that I learned painfully, is that while I can break the Skink came in cohort in combat, if I send knights against it, I'm going to lose a crap ton of knights because they came in strength 6 attacks. So after this, we did another battle, and I did not put my knights into this combat, and it was much better. But I did manage to break my opponent. They failed the panic test, or they failed the break test, and I overran, running center to center. I actually overran into the Bastillodon in the back left of this corner. And that was the end of my opponent's turn 3, so going to Empire of Sonnstahl turn 4. So for movement, I started moving up. You can see my opponent, I of course, have been shooting at these millions with my readers, but once they got wiped out, my opponent has now managed to sneak them behind my lines. They started shooting at my mortar, and then they also took a few pot shots at my arcane altar. Because of this, I started moving up. I needed to get into close combat since my artillery was now under fire. So I moved up my halberdierman. He had that second group of 25 Jaguar blessed Saurus warriors coming in, so they will likely meet in the forest in a couple turns. So I want to try to get my opponent caught in the forest. That way they lose their steadfast. On the right flank here, you can see my halberdierman. My hand weapon shieldmen are really kind of bracing for that impact, because first I can see that there's going to be the character, and if not, there's probably going to be the Saurus warriors. So they'll going to be in trouble. For magic phase, I managed to roll 4 dice, which I threw up on the oaken throne, hoping to pull out a couple of my opponent's dispel dice, which I think I threw 2 dice of this, and my opponent led through, and then managed to stop my next spell, which unfortunately happened. I think I threw Banishment up on one of the spearbacks, and my opponent dispelled it. For shooting, my cannon shot at the character, and this time did a direct hit, and I think did 3 more wounds, which was enough to kill it. So that killed my opponent's general at least, so that was a good boon for me. My crossbowman shot at this spearback that my banishment did 1 wound to last turn, and managed to finish it off. So that was fantastic. And my mortar targeted this group of Saurian warriors and managed to kill off, it looks like 7. So last turn my shooting was pretty pathetic, this turn my shooting was pretty fantastic. So it seems to be spot and miss, but at least this round it was really good for the Empire. Going in close combat, I don't have a picture of it, but you can see that the Bestowed now has 3 wounds out of its, I believe, 4 or 5. My opponent did no wounds to me on either of my 2 characters, and I did 3 character wounds to it, but it held. Being cold-blooded, it easily held. Going to my opponent's turn 4, my opponent charged these skinks into my cannon. Obviously, shooting wasn't getting the job done, so my opponent just charged them in. My opponent attempted to charge the Saurian warriors into my hand weapon and shield troops. I elected to flee, I believe, and I fled off the board, and so my opponent had a failed charge. She kind of stumbled forward an inch. On the left flank, you can see my opponent's Skink Braves and Saurus Warriors and with second bestowed on starting to move in. I have only 4 archers left. They actually aren't fleeing. I turned them around to shoot at, I think, the chameleons at one point. So right now they're just facing the wrong way, but they're not fleeing yet. My opponent, snuck in the chameleons behind my lines and started taking pot shots at my mortar. For magic phase, my opponent rolled 11 power dice. Again, a really powerful magic phase. I already used my disposal scroll, so I know this was going to be a painful turn. My opponent threw the silver spike at my hand weapon and shield men, so I must not have fled. My opponent must just have failed that charge then. Sorry about that. Threw the silver spike at my hand weapon and shield men. I killed 1 because they don't have a super armor. It didn't really help that much. My opponent threw up the Beast Within on the yellow or the Jaguar Saurian warriors. I let that off. I had a plan on using my archers as a chaffing unit to just get in the way and to hold back this unit until the following turn while my halberdiers can get into combat. So I let that through. Yeah, there's just another picture. You can see that it's on the Saurian warriors there with the Jaguar. In close combat, my opponent wiped out my cannon with the skinks. You can see the chameleons shot 2 of my crew from the mortar, but the mortar was actually still alive. And then over by the Bestowed On, my Lord and my priest actually managed to kill the Bestowed On outright, and I believe I overran into my opponent's front arc of their Saurian warriors, the purple ones. And we already fought combat, so that was the end of combat. So going to Empire of Sonnstahl turn 5. For movement, I just moved my archers just to chaff up the Jaguar Saurian warriors. Other than that, I didn't have a whole lot of movement. I rolled 5 power dice, which I believe I threw at Shield of Protection, which my opponent dispelled. Shooting, I started shooting at my crossbowman started shooting at the 25 block of non-blessed Saurian warriors. I managed to kill 4 of them off. I also charged my arcane hurricanum, or my arcane altar, into one of the spearbacks, which I killed and then overran into that level 2 skink priest in the following turn, which was fantastic. In close combat, I managed to kill off, I think, just 2 of my opponent's Saurian warriors. My general is locked in a challenge with his Saurian veteran. I believe I put 1 wound on the Saurian veteran, and the veteran put 1 wound on me, and my opponent did no wounds to my priest. I think I lost combat, but I held. Going to Saurian Ancient turn 5, my opponent, for movement, just charged my chaffing skink archers, easily wiped them out on the left flank, and readied themselves to take a charge from my halberdiers. On the right flank, my opponent declared a charge with the non-blessed Saurian warriors into my crossbowmen, which did a stand and shoot action, which was pretty pathetic. For magic, my opponent rolled up 7 power dice. I don't have any pictures of spells. I think my opponent got 1 or 2 spells off, but I don't think they were anything dramatic. I know I threw all my dice at dispelling the Beast Within on the Saurian Warriors, the Jaguar Saurian Warriors. So other than that, I think my opponent got off the Spirit Spike again and killed off a couple of Halberdiers, but other than that, nothing of substantial went off. As I said, my opponent did manage to charge the Saurian Warriors into my crossbowmen. I did a stand and shoot reaction, which I killed 1. You can see that 1 off in the back. This was a bloodbath. I think my opponent wiped me out to a man, or at least wiped me out enough that I fled and I auto-broke and ran me down. Over here you can see I have my chaffing archers, which my opponent charged and easily wiped and then just did a reform. Oh yeah, my opponent also threw some of the dice at Burning Brightness on my Halberdiers. That's where they threw some of the power dice on, and burned off 4 of my Halberdiermen. And then shooting with the Skink Braves killed off another 3. So this unit's slowly starting to get whittled down there. Yeah, after combat you can see that my opponent easily wiped out my archers and just kind of turned the face. If you recall, last phase on my turn I overran with my Arcane Altar into the Skink Priest. I easily killed the Skink Priest and I reformed to face the Saurian Warriors. In the combat with the generals, I was unable to put a wound on his general, his Saurian Warrior. His Saurian Warrior was unable to put any wounds onto my character. His other warriors did manage to put 1 wound on my priest, who only put 1 wound on the Saurian Warriors. I lost combat, I failed my break test, and I fled, but luckily my opponent didn't chase. Or my opponent did chase, excuse me, but they didn't catch. Over here on the right flank, you can see my opponent easily wiped out my crossbowmen and turned to face my Hand-Open Shieldsmen, which are not long for this war, probably. And going to turn 6, Empire of Sonnstahl turn 6, the last turn of the game, I declared a double charge with my Halberdiers and my Arcane Altar into the Saurian Warriors with this Jaguar upgrade. This isn't the best position I'd like. We're both in the woods, so we're both kind of losing our steadfast, but I'm hoping that I can just, with bodies and with that extra Arcane Altar giving me a +1 to hit, I can actually get some wounds through and break the enemy. For magic, I managed to roll 7 power dice, so that was good. I only had 1 wizard now. My level 3 was wiped out on the right side, so I only had my level 2 Lord of Life. I threw up the Oaken Throne. I think I threw up Healing Waters, which my opponent dispelled, and then I threw the rest of my dice at Volun's Blessing, because I'm a cleric in that unit, who I did manage to get off, and that is the reroll to wound. This picture was actually taken after close combat. In shooting, I don't have any shooting left. My mortar was wiped out, my cannon was wiped out, my crossbowmen have been wiped out, so I don't really have any shooting left. So this picture, like I said, was taken after close combat. I broke my enemy, I took some casualties, I killed off quite a few of them. They fled, and I unfortunately failed to catch. My Arcane Engine, though, did charge or overrun into the Bestowed. You can see that on the right side. So going to Saurian Ancient turn 6. Over here on the right flank, my opponent charged my general and cleric with the Saurian Warriors, who continued to flee and didn't make it off the board, so are still on the board. You can see that the Saurian Warriors on the right there, they charged my Hand-Open Shieldmen, who fled, and on the very bottom left of this picture, so they're still on the board, but they're fleeing at the moment. My opponent got 8 magic dice. They threw up enchanted blades on the skink chameleons. I think I tried to dispel this and I failed. And because they had this +1 to hit, between them and this remaining skink hunters, they managed to wipe out the remaining wound on my cleric. So my general is still alive with 2 wounds remaining, but he is fleeing at the moment. On the left side of the board, my impact hits did nothing. I did nothing to the Bestowed, and it did 1 wound to me, but I had my BSB right there and it held, so I didn't break. And this was actually the end of the game. So it ended up being a 13-7 loss for me, or 13-7 victory for my opponent. However, because of the secondary objectives, there's the token on the right side of the battlefield, which nobody's really close by, and there's the token on the left side of the battlefield, which is actually just in front of my Halberdiers, who actually, because they do have a banner, do claim that. So if I'm reading the rules correctly, that actually gives me a +3 and my opponent a -3, which would mean it'd be a 10-10 draw. So, I don't know. I felt like I lost this battle. My opponent kind of felt like they won, and I kind of felt that they won too. So, I'm giving the victory to my opponent. But either way, I'm not we may be 10-10 according to the rules, but I felt like my opponent really did outplay me. I felt that I kind of hamstringed myself at the very beginning by putting that kind of small church building in the way between my halberdiers and my melee 20 infantry. I felt like that kind of broke my lines into two groups. I think I should have tried to put all my troops down on the right side of that and just kind of castle in the corner and then move forward. But I made that mistake, and I think that's what cost me on my right flank instead of. But my left flank was doing all right here at the end. Actually, my opponent and I played pretty much this exact same list again the following day. The only difference was I rolled a different lore randomly on my Inquisitor. I rolled Shadow, and again I was starting. The battle was very similar. I was kind of castling in the back, because I outranged my opponent. But unfortunately, on the first turn, my mortar misfired, and it was out for the rest of the game. And then on the second turn, my cannon misfired and was out for the rest of the game. So I'm like, great. So my two artillery pieces misfired at the very beginning of the game. So after that, I had to march out my troops, and I took this group of halberdiers, which you can see in this picture, in the next game, and they went into a group of 25 Stars Warriors without a character, just 25 Stars Warriors. I think they had the blessing of the Jaguar, that group did. And I managed to get a Mind Razor off, which is a shadow spell, which gives me a +1 attack. No, excuse me, it makes all my wounds hit automatically and gives me an armor piercing 1. And on my halberdiers, which have a cleric who get a reroll to attack anyways on the first run of combat, and having a +1 strength already, so they're having a +2 strength or -2 due to 1 strength and 1 armor piercing. I actually did 26 wounds after my opponent's armor saves on a group of 25 Stars Warriors, and it completely wiped out that unit. So I just saw my opponent's face go from thinking that they could handle this fight to just this shock of this group of halberdiers completely wiping out a group of Stars Warriors. So I think I learned my lesson. I think I need to be more aggressive. In the past 2 battle reports, I've been more defensive, kind of allowing my shooting to kind of open the game and just kind of holding back and letting my shooting try to do as much as it can, which honestly doesn't seem to do enough before my opponent gets to me. So I think I need to be a bit more aggressive. So I have a game plan for this weekend against the same opponent, which I will probably be bringing a similar list. I don't know what my opponent will be bringing. And I think I'm going to try to be much more aggressive than I have been in the past 2 games. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much the end. I don't really have any more thoughts from the first battle report. If you haven't already checked that out, go back and check that out. It's a very similar army list, just a little bit different. You can kind of see the theme I'm working with, and I'm trying to go along with that. So I don't know. With the next few games, hopefully I can polish it up and maybe get a pretty decent fighting force. Again, if you have any suggestions, especially with the Ritter Knights, I would love to hear that. If you could like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. I'm just barely starting out here on YouTube, but I'd love to have more viewers and more comments and more subscribing. And as always, if you guys saw any mistakes in my video, I would be more than happy. If you guys could put them out, I would be more than happy. I mean, this is only my, I think, 4th 9th age battle, so I'm sure I'm still doing rules wrong. So if you guys could maybe help point those out, that would be fantastic. But other than that, I would thank you and like and subscribe. Thanks. Obsidian Nubis out.